everyone. Welcome to our inaugural Data Ethics Professional webinar. So we're going to be talking today about operationalizing data ethics at PwC. I'll introduce our speaker in just a second. Before I do, I wanted to give a little bit of background about why we're starting this webinar series and what it's about. So as many of you might know, we already run a certification course called Data Ethics Professionals that's been going for a number of years. And we do this because we want to make sure that we're living in a world where data is working for everyone. And we've got a lot of fair and transparent practices around data usage and data collection, data sharing. So one of the things that we've learned from doing data ethics professionals is that people really value the chance to do some networking, to talk to other people who are interested in these sorts of issues. And they want to be able to sort of touch base with what's sort of going on in the field, what kinds of issues other people are grappling with, and can they get any good ideas about what they can do in their own organization from some of the things that our other data ethics professionals are doing. So that's what this webinar is about. So we're going to start in just a minute. I think we're probably still getting a few people trickling in. So as we wait for a few more people to arrive, what I was wondering is if you'd be willing to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd really like to use these webinars as a chance to network. And I think a lot of you are probably pretty interested in data ethics. So if it's something that you want to do, please feel free to introduce yourself as we wait for everyone else to arrive. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is going to be recorded and shared via social media, our email newsletter. It's going to be archived on the ODI website. So if you do have to leave halfway through or something and you'd like to catch up on the rest of it, that's fine. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, our speaker is going to be doing a Q&A session at the end, so you can ask lots of questions to sort of delve more deeply into her expertise, which is quite considerable. And she's probably going to have lots of great advice for you about how you could look at operationalizing data ethics in your workplace. So great. I see lots of introductions popping in. So good to see. Just give it another minute or two before we start. You can see we've got people from all over the world. We've got lots of people from government, people from the private sector. Excellent, just highlighting how relevant data ethics is to everyone. So we'll get going. I think a few more people will probably trickle in. So our speaker today is Jessica Dervishi. She is a digital ethics manager at PwC. So she works in the Chief Data Office, and her background's in data governance, but she's now overseeing a lot of the data ethics for PwC. So she's going to introduce herself in a little bit more detail in just a second. I'll introduce myself as well. My name's Kay Achenbach. I am a senior learning specialist at the ODI, and I deliver a lot of the training for data ethics professionals. Really quickly, I just want to show you this. If anybody is interested at the end of this session about signing up for the certification course so that you too can, sort of increase your expertise in the area of data ethics, if you haven't already, please feel free. I'll show this at the end as well. So our next cohort for DEP starts in March. So you can find out more by scanning that QR code. Right, over to Jessica.
Thank you so much, Kay. I'll quickly share my screen. Perfect. Thank you everyone for taking the time to turn up today. I'm so excited. I haven't done one of these in a long time. Most of my presentations have been in person, so very interesting to be back on the webinar now. But today I'll be discussing data ethics at PwC in our journey so far. So this is around operationalizing data ethics and putting it into day-to-day practices rather than going through the details of what data ethics is and those principles. So just a quick introduction about myself. So as Kay said, right now I'm overseeing the digital ethics capability within our internal Chief Data Office. And my background is predominantly in data governance. I started back in business management in investment banking a while ago, and it was in the data and transformation space. That's where I got really interested in data and moved into a data governance role of the newly formed Chief Data Office there. And then about 3 years ago, I joined PwC in the data governance space. I was looking after people data in that area, and then moved into the Chief Data Office, where I was doing data governance as well as data ethics, and now have moved into digital ethics. So a bit of a journey there, but with how technology is changing, it's a very important role that I take very seriously and I am very excited about. So I've been doing this for about a year and a half, and recently won the Tech Women 100 Award for my efforts in operationalizing data ethics at PwC. Oh, and my hobbies, so I've put it in there to make it a bit personal, which are Pilates, tennis, and traveling. So those are my 3 main hobbies when I do have time. So as I said, this is not about data ethics much, but more about how we operationalize it. But just to cover what I define as data ethics and what we tend to use to define data ethics at PwC is a branch of ethics that examines data practices to identify the potential risks and evaluate them. This includes the whole life cycle from collection of data all the way to retention and storage of data, which all have different ethical considerations that affect a range of areas. And how we look at data ethics is we want to ensure that our data-driven processes, as well as our technologies, considers the rights and well-being of individuals and communities as well. And what we want to focus on is not just the guardrails, but it's about being able to give people the skills to understand the value and limitations of data in the data-driven processes. And as I said before, it has become more prominent, as you all may know, in today's digital age and the emerging technologies landscape. So a bit about why we should care and why PwC cares. So trust and reputation, it plays a crucial role in us building trust with our customers, partners, the public. By us demonstrating a commitment to ethical practices, we can enhance our reputation and steward the trustworthiness of being able to steward data effectively, whether that's our internal data, client data, etc. Legal and compliance, of course. So data ethics is that beyond compliance element. So just by taking into consideration data ethics, you ensure adherence to laws and regulations more effectively. Customer expectations. So this is quite a positive one, because in today's digital age, customers are becoming more increasingly concerned about how their personal data is being collected, stored, used. So being a firm that prioritizes data ethics can meet customer expectations a lot better, which is really important for the go-to-market strategy in today's day. Then we've got the data quality and accuracy element. So this is a bit self-explanatory, but by ensuring ethical data practices, we reduce the risk of error and bias, which is very important in overall accuracy of data and decision-making. Then we wanted to hone into that avoiding bias and discrimination. The unethical data practices can perpetuate biases and discrimination, leading to unfair outcomes, which we absolutely want to avoid at all costs. And then the social impact as well, because data is a powerful tool, and that's a message that I've really taken from the ODI. And it's just about how can we shape this and shape our society so that we can have a positive impact with using data and promoting inclusivity. And then last but not least, future-proofing. So data ethics is becoming increasingly important as technology evolves. So when we start building our tools and our solutions, it takes time, effort, and cost to build these tools. We want to make sure that we future-proof them as much as possible by embedding ethical considerations. So when the regulatory landscape does change, we are kind of more future-proofed and more secure in that way. So when we started looking at data ethics and how we were going to properly operationalize this at the firm, we held a workshop with some key stakeholders, including compliance, technology, data, consultants, and also just data tributaries that were not part of any of these projects, but to have that diverse opinion. And what we came up with was 4 emerging themes, 4 key themes that we based our data ethics initiatives on and based operationalizing data ethics on. And these 4 key themes were as followed. So it was decision making and governance. So being able to understand how decisions are made, making sure there is one approach to the way decisions are made. So then further down the line, we can audit that, see why and how those decisions are made, and also having the right people in place to make those decisions. And the right people in place can mean many things, but what we try to look at is, do we have enough of diverse opinions in the space to be able to make those decisions, and are they well informed? Then we've got the regulation and building trust theme that emerged. So this is all around what I discussed earlier about making sure our customers understand what we're doing, having that layer of regulation and going beyond compliance. Then enabling the workforce. So data ethics is such a topic that can apply to any project and most things that we do nowadays. So being such a major firm, how can we enable the workforce to use tools and self-serve in the data ethics space? And also balancing risk and reward. So not seeing data ethics as just compliance or another checklist, but seeing it as an enabler to innovation, and choosing the approach that's going to be able to effectively let you as a firm or as an organization balance your risk and reward. So I'm going to go into how our kind of operationalizing model and how we look to operationalize data ethics. So we had our key drivers, which were business outcomes. So looking at what were our business outcomes, what did we want to achieve, and how we wanted to do this. Our external influences, so whether that's any policy papers coming down from government, any recommendations in industry, and then compliance, of course. So this is always horizon scanning to keep up to date with the latest regulation and compliance, so that feeds into our op model. And then we had the umbrella of our op model, which is our agreed ethical considerations. So having agreed ethical considerations ensures that the activities will align with our firm's goals and ethics. So this is the basis of all our activities in the ethics space. You can Google data ethics principles and look at the government ones. They're quite robust, but for us, they are constantly changing. And there isn't one kind of set principle, because it just depends on what you agree with leadership or as a firm of what the main ones are for you, and how you kind of translate them into the activities that you conduct. So then we've got the next layer, which is our core components and our key enablers to data ethics. These are the services and offerings that a data ethics capability should look to provide to successfully operationalize data ethics. So this includes awareness and culture. So part of what I mentioned before, it's not just about following a set of rules or policy, but it's just being able to give our people the skills to be able to think in a certain way and know how to tackle data ethics decisions. Then we've got the facilitation. So for high risk projects, it's important that a lot of the decisions are not down to one person, but actually facilitated through a clear and auditable process. So we've got a facilitation document that we kind of follow, and it gives you a risk score along with actions to see if the risk is acceptable to the reward in the data ethics space. Then there's the guidance and central hub. So this will be a range of guidance involving self-serve checklists to be able to navigate it all in one place. I think what we find is that when it's something that where you cannot see the direct value, or something that'd be quite difficult to navigate, such as data ethics, the easier you make it for people to find, the more likely people are to use it. So I think this is a very key component. And then a diverse range of skills, subject matter expertise, and tools are essential to supporting the data ethics offering. This can include things like privacy enhancing technologies, fairness and bias mitigation tools, and then also looking at actual SMEs such as data scientists, and being able to navigate and tap into as much people and skills as possible that you have at your disposal in your organization or your firm. And then this is all underpinned by our data ethics governance, which is having as much robust processes and controls to successfully operationalize data ethics, looking at roles and responsibilities, escalation routes, etc. And my recommendation for this is trying to tap into as much as your current governance frameworks as possible and seeing where it best fits in. So it's not just an additional framework, but also appreciating that it does need to be mentioned and called out. So I'm going to take a quick minute to pause and have a drink. I felt like I spoke a lot, and let you take in the visual and just kind of reflect if these are components that you have implemented or that you can implement within your organizations, and how you see that potentially working for you, if this is a journey you're kind of embarking on. Perfect. Okay. Now I wanted to go into detail on some of those rather than going into our whole operating model and all these process documents. But what I really wanted to touch upon was the awareness and culture piece and the workshops and the importance of these. So I started the data ethics workshops within PwC after I did the ODI data ethics professional course, because there was so much I took from that in terms of skills and ways of thinking that I wanted to kind of adapt and bring kind of back to the firm to cater to as much people as possible. So we host a range, I kind of a one-man team with whoever can support, host a range of data ethics workshops to cater from, groups, small teams from 5 to about 500 participants. These are usually delivered in person just to have that personable aspect because of the topic and to get that engagement. But the aim of this is to provide an understanding to people on what data ethics is through relatable case studies. So this depends on what line of service, what team, what kind of work they'll be working on, and really personalizing it to put them in that mindset. And what's worked really well is just being able to take use cases that could be quite, controversial at first look, and then having people split into 2 teams where you tell one team you've kind of sponsored the project, so you want this to go ahead, and then have a compliance team that is questioning the risks of the project and having them talk out and come to a kind of middle point where everyone's comfortable with the project. And I think the importance of this is to just change that narrative that data ethics is compliance or another additional layer that you have to do, but more seeing it as an enabler to innovation and that it isn't just a roadblocker. So this has been very, very crucial. And we've started off with the early careers population. So that's grads, apprentices, and, first 5 years that have come through, because we believe they're going to be, the leaders of the future. So if they have data ethics embedded in their mindset, that's just going to make my job so much easier in the future and not having to shout about it as much. And then at the same time, it's important to also provide kind of teachings to directors and partners and leadership roles, because it's important for them to understand how there's different types of ethics and different people think differently when it comes to ethics. So it's important to take into consideration a diverse set of opinions, because it's difficult to find a right and wrong, and it is about opinions and mitigations. And by conducting these workshops, what we have found is that it then supports the rest of the operationalizing journey, because then you have people then coming to you for self-serve tools or accessing the central hub or reaching out for facilitations, and it just makes the whole kind of maturity increase overall. And what we have found, it has contributed to a positive culture, a lot of accountability. So one thing we do is we show people they need to assume accountability when making decisions. So by giving them data ethics tools that they can follow, they're able to be more comfortable with their decisions that they've taken accountability for. And then the fostering innovation piece. So as I said, understanding that data ethics does spur innovation and can differentiate if you like open up some business opportunities that are both, they can be profitable and ethical. You don't have to choose one or the other. I just wanted to share a quick example of a data ethics tool. So we have such a range of resources that we've built, but something as simple as this map, or even, Kay, correct me, I can't remember, you have the ODI canvas, if I'm correct in saying. So just something like that, you can use the resources such as the ODI canvas, and it just really helps with the thinking in the journey to say, look, you know, you've gone through the journey, so now you should have identified the risk, come up with mitigations, and kind of be more comfortable with your decision. And even using, what I've tried to do is use elements such as gut feeling. So if you look at the introduction, it's like, what's your initial gut feeling on the project? Because it brings that personal approach to it. And a lot of the time, this is not people's fault, but you're so into your work and you're so into your project, you don't kind of take a step back and reflect on how you may even feel about it, or any concerns that you may have, like as a person or in your gut based on your personal ethics. So I think that's a very important component of it. Even though there is no right and wrong answer, it still does bring some very good conversations to the table. And then this is how, as a data ethics capability, you can support the firm's data ethics journey, or as an individual, or however your organization may work. But I think it's important to publish a clear and transparent process that outlines like the steps you can take when concerns arise. So you can report, escalate and record those risks, so that they can be taken by the data ethics team and you can work on them to mitigate them. Then there's the support element, which is how can we support the development of innovative solutions while eliminating the risk of ethical debt. Then we've got the monitoring piece, which is maintaining a detailed record of all ethical concerns, investigations and resolutions, so that you can start building a portfolio of how you've tackled certain decisions, why you've done that, and help you in the future as well. We also, under the monitoring, it's around regularly reporting on the status and outcomes of certain cases that come from the reporting route, because it's important to see how these have been tackled, what are people reporting, and if there are any trends emerging, you can then tackle them back in the agreed principles and approach, so they kind of feed back to each other. And then just ensuring accountability across the firm to manage the risks arising in the data ethics space as well. Then in the metrics, we do put in place KPIs and metrics across all activities in order to track data ethics across the firm. This is just key for any project, and I think it's really recommended, even though it's hard to kind of see that immediate benefit and tangible outcomes with the data ethics space. So metrics are really key. And then following on from metrics, the way we kind of derive this is through our maturity stages. So last but not least, we'll just cover the maturity stages a little bit. So measuring data ethics maturity, I think, is a key aspect of in the journey of successfully operationalizing data ethics. So being able to put those clear targets and clear plan in place to move from one stage to the next, because sometimes it's difficult to measure success and value in this space. So this is a good tool to show that progress, measure it, and it not be so overwhelming, because you have clear targets to move from foundational to developing or managing to optimizing. And wherever you are in that journey, you would know what you kind of need to do to get to the next bit, rather than having to being on the foundational stage and thinking about things in leading without building your foundations and your key components. So that's where we are now. I hope I've covered everything that I had in mind, but yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. That was so informative and interesting. Thank you so much. It's amazing to see the amount of work you've done to sort of create this bespoke sort of framework for PwC, and sort of how tailored that is to all of PwC's functions. So we've had a lot of questions come in, and I can see even more coming in. So what I'd like to do is start to ask you some. I'm going to try and pick a few at the start that I think might be good to lead in with, and then we'll get into some of the more detailed ones. So one of the questions I want to talk about, someone's just asked it. What's the link between data ethics and GDPR? And I sort of want to add to that because one of the things that I observe a lot when I talk about data ethics to people is people often just assume, oh, that's GDPR. Are we compliant with GDPR? That's ethics. And one of the things we've, of course, talked a lot about in the course of data ethics professionals is like, what is that gray area between compliance and ethics? And I wondered, first of all, if you could just like briefly touch on the difference between data ethics and GDPR. And also, when you started this journey of operationalizing data ethics and you had that initial workshop with just a few people and you were sort of brainstorming all the things, you specifically mentioned that you had people from a range of sort of departments and teams within PwC. And I thought that was so insightful that you did that, because I think that a lot of times people on certain teams will often think that it's the responsibility of some other team, not theirs. So I wondered if you could sort of touch on those things like compliance versus ethics, and do people understand what that is on their different teams?
Yeah, sure. So compliance versus ethics. So compliance kind of builds the foundation, so we always follow compliance no matter what. And I don't think I can go into actual detailed use cases, but we have had projects where, according to GDPR, it was okay to go ahead with the project. But then looking at it from an ethics point of view, for example, using our employee data to build tools, etc. Looking at it from an ethics point of view, you start asking those more detailed questions around, do we think there's going to be risks in the future based on the context of the data, in terms of, is it clean enough? Do we understand the source of it, the metadata? Are we comfortable enough to use that data for these decisions based on knowing the quality of the data? So those are all questions that we don't really answer with GDPR. And I think that's kind of one of the main differentiators. And if we go back to this element of it, so it's like things like anonymization, those link directly with GDPR. But it's the sense that sometimes we can have, for certain projects, data not anonymized or anonymized in a certain way, and it ticks a GDPR box. But in terms of the project team, when you analyze the risks in the data ethics space, you think, actually, we need to go a step further in that. Or based on this tool, it can kind of backtrack, and all those conversations that maybe don't get brought up as much in GDPR. And then there's the whole continuous improvement element and the impact on stakeholders, which is not covered as much in depth in GDPR as well.
So,
and then, sorry, I was just going to say one more. And then GDPR is mostly really concerned on that people data element, and sensitive data and special category data. Whereas with data ethics, we literally cover all sorts of data, even third-party data as well. So, yeah.
That's what I was just about to say is, sometimes you can have ethical or unethical consequences from a data project, even if it isn't about data about people, personal data. So even if GDPR, you don't really feel like it's a big concern in your area, it doesn't mean that you have nothing ethical to think about. Were people aware when you started this journey within PwC, sort of like what data ethics was, and did you have anything that you needed to do to sort of inform people about that?
I think we had the same kind of questions, it's GDPR, is data protection, etc. So to inform people about that, it is through things like the workshop and just constant communication and articles. And the culture and awareness piece is significantly more important than you'd ever think in this space.
One of the questions that I asked Jessica before we actually started the webinar is PwC is such a big organization. And so how do you tackle that? How do you get the word out to everybody?
Yeah, and I said to Kay, I don't. So it's really hard to reach everybody. I think being there for a few years, I kind of built a network, which was quite important in being able to tap into the right people. So as I said, leveraging your current governance models, whether that's risk leads, whether that's data owners, etc., and being able to kind of have a way, a map on what you're going to tackle first and how you're going to move through the firm. But at the same time, what really, really did help more than I would ever think was those workshops, because then you have other people speaking about data ethics as well, because they've done the workshop, they have access to those tools, and they're like, should we use this to their teams, etc. So it's just been kind of a combination of both, and just being able to leverage as much routes as possible to get it embedded. And I feel like once it's embedded, because it just does feel like more of a culture change than the process change to me. So that's kind of the differentiator.
That makes sense. Another question that's come in is, and I think it's very related, in which part of the organization should data ethics sit and why?
I am not commenting on that. People are going to record this and just send it to their meetings and be like, no, it should sit with me. I think it just depends. I've been I've been at this firm, which is a huge firm, and I've also been at an organization which has been I've been at HSBC, a major bank, which operates so differently and has kind of a clear route. Whereas with data ethics, it's a bit, so it just depends, because we've got AI policy teams, we've got tech risk teams, we've got the chief data office, we've got so many teams that you can be like, okay, this fits in there. And I think it needs to be a collaboration of all of them, and whoever leads that working group or leads the strategy, that's absolutely fine. But it can't sit in one space and everyone does it all, because you need everyone. You need an army in this space.
That actually brings me to another question. One of the things that people ask me a lot is, how do we actually get that diversity of opinion so that we can anticipate what our stakeholders might have objections to or might have concerns about and actually address those? Can you give any really practical advice on how to identify and include people with diverse opinions? And I think that's partly about actually people's ethical frameworks and how they make decisions, because obviously lots of people are going to have different opinions about right versus wrong. We also had another question that I think is related about how you embed diversity and inclusion in your approach. So those are probably related, but not exactly the same.
Yeah, so I think one thing is very important to have. I don't like to use the word, champions, or you just need to be able to have some people that are not related to the project. You need to have a range of, because when we talk about diversity, you think ethnic backgrounds, but I also think it's important to have a diversity in what kind of stage you are in your career, your age as well, your life experience. So it's like everything. And just being able to, so it's mostly in the facilitation column that I was going to go back again. So when you look at the facilitation piece and you're facilitating a data ethics journey, it's up to that facilitator to be able to put the right group of people together to then be able to ask those questions. And those people need to be able to, one, have a basic understanding of data ethics, and two, again, you're going to choose from a range of people as much as you can available to you in your firm that have volunteered to do this. So again, goes back to the workshops and drumming up volunteers, and then being able to curate a nice group where you think, okay, this facilitation is going to have a diverse set of opinions. We're going to get the right questions asked, and it's going to challenge the project to the point where after this facilitation, there should be no questions that come as a surprise. So it's all within that facilitation, who's leading that that's what I would recommend.
Yes, makes sense. Next question that we have here. So one of the questions that I sort of wanted to come back to was about, do you think that this being an ethical organization has given PwC a competitive advantage, for example, when it comes to putting in bids for work?
100%. I think before even discussing like data ethics, the way PwC's decision making was, it was followed a very clear, business ethics kind of framework, and that does give that competitive advantage for go-to-market. And I've seen that a lot more recently. And now mentioning, the AI policy, the AI ethics and digital ethics, data ethics piece as part of a solution and offering, rather than saying, okay, this is the product, but looking at, how we can also bring data ethics into that solution and continuously monitor rather than just handing over products or handing over solutions. I feel like that does really give a go-to-market competitive advantage for us. As I mentioned in one of the previous slides, the customers are taking this more seriously, are paying close attention to it more and more, because they do want to future-proof solutions, which, okay, maybe they're doing it for the reason of monetary gain and not having to spend money on something that's going to be irrelevant because a new regulation is going to come in that's going to get rid of it, or etc. But at the same time, I'm happy that ethics is taken into consideration no matter the reason, and data ethics in particular, because I saw a question, it's hard, but someone mentioned a comment that ethics should be across like the whole organization, which I agree. Ethics is the basis, business ethics, etc. But it is important to start calling out data, digital ethics, and those actual conversations and elements that are unique to that. So they're not just under the whole ethics umbrella and kind of diluted.
Yeah, excellent point. Someone's just asked sort of a follow-up question here. How do you persuade very small companies that data ethics is not optional or attained simply by deploying privacy-enhancing technologies? So PwC, I guess, has a lot of resources to draw upon. Do you think that this is sort of similar for small companies?
I think for smaller companies, I think it could be a little bit easier. And the reason I say that is because with larger companies, it's so hard to navigate that across the whole firm to be able to see everything. Whereas for smaller companies, if you do have a data ethics, able to build very small data ethics capability, push that awareness and culture piece, that guidance, that resources, again, you might not be able to have the capacity to create resources from scratch, but you do have resources through the ODI yourselves, Kay, whether it's a data ethics professional, making sure those 5 leaders in your firm have encouraged them to do something like the data ethics professional, and that will kind of then, I think, work. I think, but I've always worked on large companies and it's more difficult. And as you know, PwC, we do have lots of large clients in the data ethics space that we've done work on. But
coming back to the point about sort of sort of growing awareness and importance of data ethics, I'm going to read to you now a question that David put in the chat. It says, in work that has been done in this area of data ethics, have any links been seen between an organization's ethical compass pre-data, i.e. how they treated customers, employees, etc., before recent AI data processing tools have come about? And now we're in a new information age. Have organizations' ethics changed, or is it about a rush to jump on the AI data bandwagon, and this is leading to an abandon of previously held ethical values?
I've just found the question. I'm going to have to read that again. Sorry, I just want to...
I guess to paraphrase, like, do we think that basically the sort of increasing prominence and awareness and access to AI, is that changing companies' ethics around data ethics and data usage?
I mean, you'd hope so. We saw that big shift. I don't mean to like be confusing people by going back to GDPR, but we did see that big shift when GDPR came through, and you kind of had to do it, and it just became, you know, now it's become the norm. I think with data ethics, it's become quite similar, where it's now become the norm. There are customer expectations around how the data is used, etc. I think it's I can't remember which government department published this, but it was around the public's attitude to how they think their data is being used by these companies. And I think it's just, people have become more aware, people are questioning more, which is perfect. And that has, I feel, changed the attitude to ethics within organizations, because they are being put under scrutiny, which is great, which is just what we need as a society.
And I would add to that as well. One of the things that AI has done is it's really allowed a lot of ethical issues to scale. So where you might have had ethical problems in the past that were relatively limited by our limited capacity to sort of use data or collect data, now that we have more technology and we have more AI, we can, it's sort of scaled up the problem in a way. You know, just to take ChatGPT as an example, we have like copyright infringement has always been an issue, but now, I mean, that was an issue before ChatGPT existed, but now that we have it, it's sort of scaled that issue up. And so I think that's something that's maybe increased the awareness as people become aware of like, oh, this could actually be really big.
Yeah, and I think we kind of have to move quite quickly with it, because as you said, with AI and everything, it has brought that to the forefront, and you can kind of see how quickly things have scaled up. So I think it is important that we tackle conversations like data ethics, digital ethics, etc., within our organizations quite quickly.
Just a terminology term someone's asked, which is a really good one. What you referred to ethical debt in your talk. What actually is ethical debt?
I'm going to answer that now. I just wanted to say, Lucia, thank you. She shared the paper I was talking about around public attitudes to data and AI research. So thank you. It's run by DCIT, and it was very interesting. So I recommend having a read of that. Yes, so ethical debt. So it's around making, well, to me, how I saw it, how I see it and how we see it. It's around making decisions in the moment that in the future, if we haven't taken into account the ethical considerations, in the future, we're going to be having to, you know, change the project a lot, because society's views have changed, or as you said, people are more aware of what's happening, so they're scrutinizing the product, the service, etc., a bit more, or at the same time regulation has come into place. So the problem is then, whatever you're doing, you've not tackled the ethical element of it, so you've got that debt in place that is then going to catch up with you in the future, or it's something that you're going to have to continuously improve on. So we've got continuous improvement as the last and main element of our data ethics journey, but it's not the most, it's not the least important. I think it's one of the most important, and it's being able to have that continuous improvement and monitoring, because the space is changing so much, and there's always extra considerations.
That's a really good explanation. Thank you. What was my next question? Oh, yes. And I know PwC sort of operates globally. Do you have to adjust this model to suit the sort of regulatory environment in different countries that you have operations in?
I think so. At the moment, I'm currently working in the UK only. But as part of when we have our data ethics discussions, which are now like digital ethics discussions, what we do use is the moral machine. So I don't know, many of you have probably seen, but it's the study conducted by MIT in America, where it's like, if an automatic electric car was driving, who's it going to hit and who's it going to save? And as part of that, they have kind of had a map of how different societies and territories think. So we clearly show that France and UK, being very close geographically, act very different when it comes to ethics. So they protect the older and more vulnerable, whereas in the UK, we tend to protect the children the most. And then you've got the UK and Australia, which are so far geographically, but we're so close as society and our values that we make ethical decisions the same. So when I do have those conversations with the managers and partners and directors of the firm that are potentially leading up global projects, I always make sure that I explain to them the differences and the importance of just being careful to ensure that we have as much diverse opinions as possible, take into account where you are globally. And then when it comes to the actual regulation, we do have a separate team that does that AI policy and horizon scanning and everything, because as I said, regulation is like the backbone of everything. So we do make sure we take all of that into consideration. And then there's the ethics layer, which takes into account those nuances.
Makes complete sense. I guess that's where it's really useful to have a team in that country that deals with the regular compliance. So I'm going to read a question from Leonie now. She said, government digital and data principles focus determinedly on end users, and we're assessed on our performance in that area very rigorously. I'm interested how and where you involve end users in your work to gauge what they're comfortable with and how you sample those groups other than internal and project stakeholders.
So by end users?
I assume we mean like external stakeholders, so not within PwC, but the people who your projects might be affecting sort of out there in the world.
Yeah, so in terms of what projects are affecting, when we look at the elements of data ethics and analysing the project, we also look at once that project is out there, once that tool is out there, is there any other considerations that need to be taken place so that when let's say you buy a product or a tool and that's handed over, there needs to be a clear monitoring and guidance on how to use that. And at the moment, we're still, because it's so new and everything's coming so quickly, we're still looking at how we can kind of make that a must rather than recommendations. So if I'm creating a tool and I'm deploying it, how can I make sure the end user is using it how I intend to use it? Is that through an agreement, a contract? So it's just those conversations that I feel like are being had a lot, but no one quite has the answer yet. But in terms of if it's around how we use it as an end user, so at the same time, even though I work in the data ethics space, we have Chat PwC because we had a partnership with Chat GPT, and it's around how we as end users use that ethically as well, and having that guidance there. But because the tool is a PwC specific tool, it's quite easy to monitor and put best practices in place. So if I recommend, if within an organization you're looking to deploy tools, to look at these partnerships that you kind of ring fence, similar to how you do if you had a Google account or Microsoft, etc. I think that was the question.
Next, I think we've got 2 more questions that have popped in, unless any more come in the meantime. So next question is from Michael. Does the Prime Minister Keir Starmer's column in the Financial Times today about harnessing the power of AI worry you? There's little about data ethics, data protection, or cybersecurity mentioned in that article. And how would you, if asked, advise him to get the ethics right?
I haven't read the article because I was busy today prepping for this workshop. So I'll be sure to read the article after. Yeah, I think I stay quite close to government, and I think we have people here from, DCIT, and we've got Tech UK and a lot of good organisations that do some great work in that space. I think as much as we want to kind of push innovation, data ethics and digital ethics is a component in that. No matter what, that's how I see it, and I do feel like it will be considered. Well, I hope it will. I would advise him to keep that at the forefront. But I do think there is great work being done there. So at the moment, I'm not so concerned, but I will read the article. Maybe after that, I will be concerned. But yeah, we've got some great colleagues in the government space. Some I think I might even be on this call that are doing some great work.
I would advise them, send people on data ethics professionals so that you have that broad organizational oversight. This actually, I was just realized there was the Q&A section as well, so I was looking at the chat. So a few more questions. So one of the, I think this is a really interesting question because it sort of comes back to the issue of that was just asked about, like embedding this in government for the UK public. So it says, does data ethics require expertise in technical areas, i.e. machine learning, AI, etc.? And if so, have you encountered any pushback from technical experts who view this as their domain?
I think it does require knowledge in that. I think to have a conversation and to really understand data ethics and implementing that into projects and day-to-day work, you need to have that basic understanding of machine learning and the basically computing area. However, I wouldn't say pushback. I don't think there's needs to be pushback because, as I said, data ethics is not compliance. It's like you're giving someone a tool, you're having a conversation with them, especially if you're able to understand where their issues are. If you have that basic knowledge of the space, you're able to kind of talk through the journey and kind of sort it out. I don't think there would be pushback unless it does feel like you're going down that route of saying, no, this is not okay. This is like another, compliance checklist that you have to do, rather than making it an enabler to innovation, which is the key differentiator to success, I think. I think we have such a negative perception sometimes when we talk about data ethics. When you talk about data ethics as someone that works in the innovation space and they're so focused on building their tools and just wanting to push through, but yeah, changing that narrative, providing the tools that make it an enabler are just a key to preventing all of that.
I'll add actually some comments that I've heard throughout the course of running data ethics professionals, which, first of all, I think sometimes the technical experts are like, hey, some of this data ethics stuff, it cannot be my job. That sort of two-way communication with external stakeholders, that's not the job of somebody sort of developing the algorithm who's a data scientist. That needs to be embedded somewhere else in the organization. And so I think for them to be like, you must make your algorithm perfect. Your algorithm has to be perfectly fair. It's 100% on you. That's not a reasonable ask. They can't have a 100% perfect algorithm. That's not ever going to happen. And so those other safeguards need to be in place throughout the organization. So in that sense, I think those technical experts can feel relieved that there are other parts of the organization dealing with things that's not within their remit. But I think the point you raised, Jessica, was really good, that sometimes people can, like there's a perception that it could stifle innovation. And I think, I have heard people from technical backgrounds sort of express that concern, like, I just want to do cool things with my AI, like, don't make me worry about this. And it's not about saying like, no, don't try these things, but it's about like, okay, you've developed this really cool thing. Let's just make sure those risks are mitigated so that when we harness the benefits, those risks, aren't going to have a negative impact on people, or the benefits of it are distributed more equitably. I think we have probably run out of time for the other questions, but we will follow up with these afterwards. I think maybe now if we can swap back to the other slides. First off, if you are interested in taking the lead, as Jessica has, for operationalizing data ethics in your workplace, please feel free to get in touch. This QR code will take you to the place where you can sign up for the course if that's something that interests you, starting in March. We also do offer closed cohorts for teams within government. So we have done this in the past for an entire data team within a government department that can start really at any time. So feel free to scan that. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we do have some other ODI webinars coming up. Just a little sort of heads up for these. We've got a data and AI roadmap for this Parliament on the 21st of January. We've got our data-centric AI webinar number 6 with Chris Johnson, Chief Scientific Advisor from DCIT. That's on the 22nd. And we've got Data-Centric AI webinar number 7, Data Transparency and AI, which is on the 19th of February. So you can get more information about those with that QR code. And we also will have another data ethics professional webinar in February. So this is not the course, but just these webinars for people to share their experience and what they've done. So please do join our mailing list to find out more if you want to be made aware of the next one, or if you would like, if you are a data ethics professional, because I know we've got some in the audience here, and you'd like to deliver one of these webinars to share what you've been working on, we'd love to hear it. It doesn't have to be about operationalizing data ethics. It can be about anything that you've worked on. Oh, one final question. I just want to say a huge thank you to Jessica because she's amazing, and it's been wonderful to hear all of your sort of insights into this. People have been asking about whether they can have access to any of these tools that you've shared. So does PwC share these things publicly, and is this something that people can access?
Not at the moment, but we're working on having an external kind of digital ethics site soon. So when we do, I think I can send it to Jo, which has been organising all of this, because she has all your emails, and then you can be the first to know. Also, you can kind of follow me on LinkedIn. If you just search up my name, I'll be publishing on there a lot more. So if there is any tools that come through, I'll be sure to share it with the whole network.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear about all of this. So huge round of applause. We really appreciated it. And thanks to everyone else for coming as well. It's been great to have this discussion, and I look forward to seeing you all at our next DEP webinar. So watch this space. Once we get our date confirmed, we'd love to have you back. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.